Join us as EV4U Custom Conversions presents lead versus lithium, a close-up look. We're going to discuss and compare both lead-acid batteries and lithium batteries and see how do they really stack up against one another, both in performance and cost.
Hello, I'm Richard with EV4U Custom Conversions. And today we're going to talk about batteries, both lead acid and lithium. One of the things that we hear is that there are still people that are building conversions using lead acid batteries. And there's basically only a reason why someone does that, and that is the cost. And so today we're going to look at the two. We're going to compare the batteries, not just in the cost of the batteries, but in the cost of using the batteries. The bottom line, as far as cost of operating a vehicle, is the cost per mile. You take your purchase price, your maintenance, your insurance, your licensing, fuel, all of your operating costs, and then you divide that by the number of miles that you drive that car, and that gives you the true cost of operating that vehicle, the cost per mile. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at the cost per mile for operating a conversion using lead acid batteries versus lithium batteries, and the attributes of each. So join us as we take a close-up look at lead and lithium. All right, so we're going to talk about the batteries themselves right now. And we're going to make some assumptions along the way just so that we keep things in a good comparative. And so we're going to talk about a 12-volt deep cycle lead acid battery. And we always make the assumption that when we talk about a 12-volt battery, it's not really 12 volts. A wet cell is 2.2 volts per cell. 12-volt battery has 6 cells, so it's actually 13.2 volts. But because of the internal resistance, you take it off the charger. It's not very long after it's after the charger. It kind of hits its at rest voltage, which is 13 volts. So when we go through this, doing the math and everything, 12-volt batteries isn't 144 volts, it's 156 volts. So the battery that we're going to use for our example is a 130 amp hour lead acid battery, 12 volt, and they weigh 66 pounds apiece. And our amp hours, that's what they call the 20-hour rating, which they use for lead acid deep cycle traction batteries. The usable amp hours of that is, just like on our lithium, isn't the rated amount. In this case, the actual really usable amount is, depending on your school of thought, maximum would be 50% of the rated, or 65 amp hours. That'd be maximum. Another school of thought is that the maximum usable is only 20%, which would be 26 amp hours. So, again, we'll refer back to these figures. Life cycles. This is one of the biggest shortcomings of a lead acid battery. not, not mentioning the weight, but 300 to 400 life cycles for a good, like a traction battery, not just your marine deep cycle, but a true traction battery. 300 to 400 life cycles is about what you're going to get out of it. And then the usable voltage. What we mean by that is what's the voltage when it's fully charged, which we discussed a minute ago. It's 13 volts. And what's the minimum that we can discharge that to without doing severe damage? And that's 10.4 volts. And then the cost. And we're going to have a little discrepancy here when we talk about the cost, because we were talking about the life cycles. We were talking the top of the line. On the cost, we're going to give lead the benefit of the doubt, and we're going to go with a cheap battery. You can get a 130 ampere hour deep cycle marine battery at Walmart for $100+. So we'll use these figures as our kind of our benchmark for the rest of our discussions today. Now, in this example, we're going to talk about the lithium, and the thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about 4 lithium cells, because a 12-volt battery actually has 6 cells in it, as we mentioned earlier. And so we want to have kind of apples and apples here. So we want to get to the 13 volts or close to it. So we're going to use a 4-pack of lithium cells. So 4 lithium cells at 3.3 volts would give us, a comparable package. So 4 of those cells weigh 28.2 pounds. And we're going to use, for our examples, 100 ampere hour cells. The next step up, we used to be able to get 130 ampere hour cells. They're kind of hard to come by now. The next common jump up that we make is 180. So we're going to go with 100. And you can see it's comparable. So, usable amp hours on a 100 amp hour lithium cell, 80% is usable. So that's 80 amp hours usable. Life cycles, 3,000 plus. Some independent tests, they've gone far beyond that. And then the usable voltage on the lithium is, 10 to 14. And how we get that, let me do the math here real quick. We get that by minimum voltage. I think I figured at 2.8 volts times 4. That'd be 11.2. So we must have gone to 2.5 is the absolute minimum. You never want to discharge these cells below 2.5. Of course, that gives us our 10 volts. And then our maximum voltage at 3.5 is which we charge it to, gives us our 14. So anyway, that's our range with the lead acid, or the lithium. Minimum, just like we did here, absolute minimum, maximum, maximum. Okay, here's where we get a little bit of a differential. Cost. These Batteries run $149 a cell currently. You can get them a little less, a little more, but that's pretty middle of the road price. So 4 times 149, that's going to give us a $596 cost on the lithium. So here we have, it's a lighter cell, has a lesser rating on the lithium, but it has greater amp hour capacity, usable capacity. Huge, 10 times the life cycles, and basically the same voltage range. We're a little higher, which is, we'll see how that comes into play. But here's the big difference, is the cost. And this is why people go that direction, right there. But that's just kind of on the battery level. Let's take a look at it in a vehicle application. What does this look like penciled out in a vehicle battery pack application? So let's take a look at that now. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the pack. And for this example, we're going to use a 156 volt system, which would be 12 of our 12 volt batteries. Good freeway capable setup. And so our pack weight at 12 of these is going to be 792 pounds. That's 12 of these 66-pound batteries. The lithium, well, we'll just go down. Our amp hour capacity doesn't change. It's still, still 130 on the lead. Our watt hours. Now, you understand how to calculate the watt hours. We're going to take our voltage, 156 volts, times our rating here, our amp hour rating. So amp hours times voltage is going to give us our watt hours. This would be 20.3 kilowatt hours, or 20,300 watt hours. And then our usable watt hours. And again, based on what we talked about, usable amp hours, we're going to use that to get our usable watt hours, and that's going to be 4 to 10 kilowatt hours. And then as you're driving the vehicle, you're going to have a voltage drop. Not just when you're under load, but I mean as you are discharging that pack. And so we talked about that, where you had the minimum 10 volts and a maximum 14 volts. So our voltage start and finish, on the lead it was 10.4 and 13. So the start to finish, we're going to start off with that 156 volts. But after we drive the distance, and we'll talk about the range here later on, we're going to find that the voltage is going to drop. So when we leave home, 156 volts. When we return, and we're down to the 10.5 volts here, that's going to put our pack at 125 volts. So that's what we started with, and that's what we came back with. So you're going to feel a difference in the driving. When driving the vehicle, you're going to feel a big difference between 156 volts and 125 volts as far as the acceleration and the top speed and everything goes. And then the price for that pack we're going to use the figure that we used before, $100 a cell. We got 12 of them. The math is pretty easy. That makes it a $1,200 pack. And reality is, because of the life cycles, the maximum you're going to get out of those cells of usable life is 2 years. And we'll talk about a real world example later on. And you'll see that 2 years I'm being generous. So the cost per year over a 10-year period, if we're replacing these batteries every 2 years, it averages out to be $600 per year. So now what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the range. And in other videos, we have described how you do that. I'm going to say it quickly now, just because I don't want to make this video too long. And that is, we take the weight of the vehicle, divide it by 10, and that gives us the watt hours per mile required to move that vehicle. We take that figure then and divide it by the watt hours available in the pack, usable, and that will give us our range. So we're going to assume, for our examples, that we're starting off with a 2,000 pound car. That's our car converted, less the batteries. So a 2,000 pound car with the lead acid at the 792 pounds would put us at 2,792 pounds. And using the formula I just described, our range, our maximum range, would be 35.8 miles. And of course, our voltage drop after that range, we're going to be down to the 125 volts. Now, that's the lead. Let's look at the lithium. The lithium, they said they're about 7 pounds a piece. And so we're going to, on this, to get to that 156, we're going to run 44 cells, which I think is 154 volts. And so 44 cells, 7 pounds a piece, that puts us at 308 pounds. And of course, our amp hour doesn't change. That's at 100 amp hours. We're using 100 amp hour cells. And our maximum capacity of the pack, not usable, but just doing the straight math, it's a 14.5 kilowatt hour pack. So less amp hours, less weight, less capacity. But let's talk about the usable watt hours. We can use 80% of the rated capacity with the lithium. And so that gives us 11.6 kilowatt hours usable. Now we're exceeding that. In the voltage, we're going to assume that fully charged, we don't charge our cells over 3.5 volts per cell. So fully charged, we're at 154 volts. So we're at 156 there. And then we're going to drop these down to 2.8 volts per cell. Like I said, you can take them down to 2.5 before damage, but we're going to leave that margin. We're only going to go to 2.8, which would put us at 123 volts. Maximum discharge. So you can see this part's fairly close. Now, we come with the big discrepancy again. The pack cost at $149 a cell times 44, that gives us $65.56. And boy, the lead acid guys are going, gotcha. But these cells are good for over 3,000 life cycles. I don't know this other than what I've read over the years, but 3,000 life cycles, I've been told, equates to at least 10 years worth of driving. So, we can not replace this pack prior to that 10-year example we used, and we average our price out. So, the cost per year for the lithium, averaged out over the 10 years, just like we did here, puts us at $656 per year, if we amortize that out. Here's another part of this picture, is after 5 packs in 10 years, the lead is dead. We've got all these batteries that we've turned in for recycling because they're basically dead after we've used them. They don't have any life left. The lithium, after 3,000 life cycles, they're not dead. They will still have 80% of their original capacity. And they're still usable. And so we're still going to have 80% of this range that we're going to calculate right now after 10 years. So based on the fact that we have a vehicle that, our 2,000 pound base starting point plus our 308, that puts us at 2,308 pounds. And based on our mileage formula calculation, that gives us a range of 50 miles. Now, talking about the voltage drop. If we only drove the distance that the lead acid did, our voltage range on the lithium is going to be 136 to 145, somewhere in there. And I know this from driving both types over years. So what we have then is another advantage. So let's kind of sum this up a little bit at this point. We have a lighter pack, so it means we have a lighter vehicle. This difference in weight, 484 pounds difference, that's 2 big buddies riding with you. I mean, 2 good-sized guys. You put 2 of those guys in a Toyota or a Volkswagen or something with a gasoline engine, you notice a difference. So you're going to notice a difference in the performance of that vehicle, the acceleration, the handling, the braking. It's going to be a big difference with that 484 pound differential. The other thing is that we're going to have greater range. We're going to have, another 14 miles of range that we're not going to have with the lead acid. We're also going to have that range. This, over 2 years, is going to lose range. This will not. And here's another factor that a lot of people, until you've driven both, don't realize, and that is what I call the drivability. And that is that the discharge curve for lead acid is like this. The discharge curve for the lithium is pretty flat. And so we're not getting this voltage drop until the very end of our pack capacity. And so most of the time, we're going to have greater voltage at any given point in our pack with the lithium than we do with the lead, which means the acceleration and the way it feels will be better. And you have less of a differential between when you leave and you get back. So you leave and you go out for a 25-mile run. In the lead acid, when you leave, it's going to be peppy and nice. You get back, you're going to feel that it's much more sluggish. With the lithium, you won't notice any difference in that distance at all. None. So, big advantage there. Big advantage there. Cost over 10 years, $56 difference. To not have the maintenance required with lead acid, to have better drivability, to have a better performing car. Boy, it's starting to lean for me, okay? But we got one more set of scenarios that we want to look at, and that's the real world, which, this is real world too, but this is going to be where we talk about the cost per mile and a few other things. So let's slide over here and wrap this up. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about some mileage scenarios. And with the lead acid, our average miles over a 2-year period, and back here we saw that our original range was 35.8 miles. I'm just going to round that up to 36. So our maximum when the batteries are new will be 36 miles. After 2 years, and I know this from personal experience, after 2 years of driving, we're going to be 12 miles. Okay? A third of what we started with. And so we're going to take, what can we drive this car? And again, I know these because I actually have done this. If we take this and average it out, we get about 24 miles per day. And we're going to do that for 5 days a week. And that would give us, over 2 years period of time, we would travel 12,480 miles. Okay? And the replacement cost of the batteries that we talked about earlier, after that 2 years, would be $1,200. And lead acid's actually going up in price. Lithium's kind of holding its own or coming down. So we're going to take the $1,200 and divide that by that the mileage, the 12,480. And that's going to give us our cost per mile over that 2-year period of time, which figures out to be $0.96 per mile. That's the cost of the battery ownership, battery use. Okay? So now we're going to run this same scenario. Even though our lithium can go further and everything, we're going to run this scenario based on the same mileage. And so our replacement cost is going to be more. So and it was 2 years would be, let me do the math here. We had excuse me, we had an annual cost of $656. So times 2. So $1,312. So our replacement cost would be $1,312. And of course, this is hypothetical because we're not going to have to replace them at that point. But we're just trying to get a comparative cost per mile. And we're going to do the same mileage, the 12,480. So let me crank that out here. 1312. 480. And that gives us a cost of 11 cents per mile. Now remember, in the lead example, our batteries are toast. They have to be replaced. That's true replacement cost. Here, this is our amortized figure. These batteries are going to exceed 10 years. But to get a comparative here, we can see that it's this actually was 10.5. So it's about a penny a mile difference. Okay? Not huge. Not huge at all. But let's look at a slightly different scenario. Let's look at one that really brings this to light and to reality, and that is 80% of Americans drive less than 40 miles a day. I drive more than that. And I do it in an electric Karmann Ghia. Let's figure we drive 40 miles per day, 5 days a week, for 10 years. And we can do that. We saw that we can drive 50 miles, and not just 50 miles a day. I've driven the car 83 miles in a day before. That's just the range in and back. And actually on the Karmann Ghia, it's 53 to 60 miles. But for this example, if we drive 40 miles a day, 5 days a week for 10 years, that's 62,400 miles. Okay? And using our replacement cost of the $65.56 for the pack, which again, we really don't have to replace the pack. We'll still have 80% of our capacity. We'll still be able to drive our 40 miles after 10 years worth of driving. But at that point, the cost per mile, oops, and I did this wrong, I'm sorry. Too many notes and I got such. 40 miles per day, 5 days a week for 10 years is 104,000 miles. Okay? And the cost per mile at that amount of driving figures out to be 6 cents per mile for the cost of the batteries. And then one last thing about the lead. This is real world. We've got a guy that we featured in the previous video, our convert to electric for $7,500. This guy keeps great records. He's got 3 vehicles with this setup, and he uses the Walmart batteries, blah, blah, blah. We know all this to be true. He has a light little vehicle. He has both Ford Festiva and Chevy Sprints, both from the factory, like a 1,700-pound car. Anyway, new with the lead. He gets about 40 miles maximum, brand new. And after 16 months, he's down to 13 miles. That's real world example. So, at this point, you've got enough information to answer some questions. Which way do you want to go? You know, the cost differential is only at the time of the original purchase. And so you can see that every year that you drive, the lead is becoming more and more and more expensive. And the lithium is actually becoming less expensive. Those two are converging over time. And so the hassle factor of dealing with the lead acid, both the drivability, maintenance, replacing them every couple years or less, all of that has a hassle factor to me. I'd much rather just check and make sure that my interconnects are tight and that everything is visually good and keep on trucking. So, you know, just wanted to kind of spell it out for you in black and white so that those of you that are at that point trying to decide lithium or lead acid, and lead acid is cheaper to purchase and install in the car on day one. But is that the decision I want to make for the long haul? Do you plan on driving this electric vehicle more than 16 months or 2 years? So anyway, I hope that you find some value in our videos. We appreciate you watching. If you're so inclined, we'd appreciate it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions or comments, we always ask that don't leave them on the YouTube channel because odds are we won't respond. What we'd like you to do is send any questions or comments by email to info@evforyounow.com. And we'd be happy to respond to any questions or comments. And as always, thanks for watching.